I'm not giving any money to you who have no future. I'm going to take all the inheritance. Heather, the wife of my deceased son Jeffrey, declared loudly in front of us while still wearing mourning clothes. Jeffrey worked for a major apparel company and was the store manager at a prime location. However, at the young age of 27, he was involved in a traffic accident and his short life came to an end. My husband Thomas and I have been busy with funeral arrangements while grieving and mourning his death. Yet, despite having just lost her beloved husband in a sudden accident, there are no tears in her eyes. Instead, she only cares about the money he left behind and keeps talking about it without helping much with the funeral, which made me feel suspicion and anger towards her. Let's not talk about that now. There's no will, so it'll be divided according to the proportions set by law. I admonished her. Heather's face instantly distorted and she shouted loudly, "What? I'm just telling the truth. Are you saying you're going to take it to court? Then go ahead and try." She wailed like a spoiled child in front of the coffin where Jeffrey lay. Her hysterical and disrespectful behavior made me sick to my stomach. I was already so sad that it felt like the end of the world losing my son, and now having to endure his wife's money-grubbing tantrums made me struggle to hold back my tears. Thomas frowned in disgust as he overheard our conversation while proceeding with the funeral preparations. "Stop it, just stop. It's right before the funeral. He was your husband. At least see him off quietly. If you want the inheritance that badly, I'll give it to you," I said, somehow managing to say just that while looking down. She seemed convinced she would get the inheritance and a nasty grin spread across her face. "That's right. Of course I, the young one, should get it. I wonder how much I'll get. I can't wait. She is shameless," I said to myself. Heather stood looking down at me as I sat with my head bowed. So she probably couldn't see it. The slight smile on my lips. I won't let this greedy woman who doesn't even have the decency to mourn Jeffrey have her way. In a trembling voice, I slowly told her, "Yes. I'll give you everything. Every last bit. My name is Betty. I'm 55 years old and successfully raised my son Jeffrey. He moved out of our parents' home as soon as he got a job, so now it's just me and my husband Thomas living a peaceful life. Ever since he was a child, he was serious, kind, helped people in need around town, and was a leader who rallied his classmates at school events. It seemed his friends often came to him for advice, and each time he would listen to them on the phone, rush over to their houses, and loved doing things for others. He developed an interest in fashion and after graduating college, he got a job at a major apparel company. It's a well-known large corporation with many stores in commercial facilities, especially in urban areas. His personality was well-suited for customer-first service work, and I heard he got good reviews at the company right after joining. On the other hand, the workload was heavy and he lived a busy life every day from what I heard. Even so, he often showed his gratitude to us. "You let me live at home until I graduated college and paid for my education. This is my way of thanking you," he would say. On paydays, he would take us out to eat, arrange trips for me and Thomas, and do so much for us. For us, just having him grow up healthy was more than enough, but we were truly grateful to have a son like him who did all this for us. I was genuinely proud of the wonderful person he had grown up to be. A few years ago, when he was 25, he got married. His wife was a woman from another company in the same industry named Heather. "Hello, I'm Heather. Jeffrey and I first met through work, and we've been dating since then." She greeted me with a radiant smile. Perhaps because she worked in the apparel industry, she paid close attention to fashion and beauty, and was a very beautiful person. Compared to Jeffrey, I still have a lot to learn at work, but from now on, I want to properly support him in my role as his wife as well. It's nice to meet you, she said politely. There's no need to be so formal, I said, and she laughed shyly. Her smile was also charming, and I took an instant liking to her. I was genuinely happy that he had found such a beautiful and talented wife. Even after they got married, our relationship with Jeffrey and Heather remained good, and they would come back to visit us a few times a year. During those times, the four of us would share meals together, and those moments were always peaceful and filled with the warmth of family, making them happy times. She would help with the cooking, keep me company, and stay close by my side. She also had an adorable charm, and whenever she told a little joke, our home would be filled with bright laughter. In the midst of all this, Jeffrey got promoted and was put in charge of a store in a prime location. Of course, we held a celebratory dinner at our home, with Heather included. After that, whenever Jeffrey could take time off, the four of us would go on trips together, and we would hear about Jeffrey and Heather's happy life over the phone. Both Jeffrey and Heather, and the two of us, were enjoying our days. Heather quit her job at the same time as they got married and was supporting Jeffrey as a housewife. There was even talk of them having a child before it was too late. If that wish came true, I thought excitedly, I might even get to see my grandchild. I believed that this peaceful and happy life would continue on forever like this. However, it suddenly came to an end one day. Jeffrey was involved in a traffic accident while traveling for work and lost his life. The call came on a winter afternoon. Thomas had gone to work, and I was doing housework at home when I received a call. It was from the hospital, informing me that he had been in an accident. My face instantly turned pale, and after quickly contacting Thomas, I rushed to the hospital where he was. When I arrived, he was in the middle of receiving treatment in the operating room. And there, I found Heather, who had arrived before me. She remained expressionless and only gave me a nod of acknowledgement. A young doctor came to greet us. The veteran doctors were probably busy with the treatment and couldn't come out. The doctor told us, looking down, "We're doing everything we can, but it seems he was hit by a large vehicle that ran a red light, and his injuries are severe all over his body. I ask that you, his family, pray for his safety as well." The doctor left with a solemn expression, passing Thomas, who arrived at that moment, and we desperately prayed for Jeffrey's well-being. But a few hours later, we received the worst news. I don't remember much of what happened after that. Jeffrey's work was going well, he was happily married, and had a bright future ahead of him. To think he would close the curtain on his life at the young age of 27. I screamed and cried in front of his body, and spent a long time lost in grief in the funeral room. Afterwards, while being comforted by the doctors, I somehow managed to step out into the hospital corridor. It was as if the entire world had turned pitch black, and my heart was filled with feelings of despair. In a waiting room with just the two of us, Thomas and I cried out loud together. He was working so hard, and was only 27. Losing his life in a sudden accident like this, he must be so resentful. So regretful. Thomas said in a choked voice. I had a hard time escaping the sense of loss, so Thomas helped me with various things like hospital procedures, funeral arrangements, and dealing with the insurance company that came at the same time. While I was in a state of confusion, he helped me without losing his composure on the outside, and I was deeply grateful to him. As for Heather, she seemed to be in shock over losing Jeffrey, and was biting her lip with a solemn expression, her head bowed. The only thing I remember is that there were no tears. Was it because she didn't feel sad? Or was it just that she couldn't cry because I was too distraught? At that time, I was crushed by my own grief and didn't have the capacity to think about her. But time waits for no one. I had to quickly start preparing for the funeral, so I somehow started moving while holding back my sadness. Thomas and I were taking care of everything, but there was something that bothered me. Heather, who had been staying at our house since yesterday, wasn't helping at all. Although my husband was serving as the chief mourner this time, she was still part of the family as his wife. And having just lost her husband, one would think she would emotionally want to do what she could. When they first got married, she would often help me whenever she came to our house. So I knew that she wasn't an inconsiderate person from the beginning. What in the world happened? And far from doing nothing, when she does open her mouth, all she talks about is money. Hey, what's going to happen to the savings he left behind? I can't believe she would say that to us who just lost our son. I feel unpleasant and unintentionally glare at her. Thomas happens to be out making funeral arrangements, so it's just me and her here. There's no will, so I think it will be divided according to the proportions set by law. But let's not talk about that now. We can sort it out properly later, right? When I admonish her like that, she purses her lips while still sitting on the sofa. I feel uncomfortable seeing how shiny and beautifully styled her hair is, to an extent unsuitable for a funeral. But you two have no future left, right? I'm young, so I'll be taking all of his inheritance. Those words make me freeze in the middle of what I was doing. She mocked us as a couple because of our age, and had the audacity to try to take the entire inheritance for herself because she's young. The nerve of her to declare that so boldly filled me with uncontrollable disgust. That's why I'm saying we can't decide now. And please help out a little too. I thought I was stating the obvious, but apparently it was a response she didn't like, because Heather furrowed her brow and advanced on me. What? Are you saying you want his money? How greedy. You want to take it to court? Then go ahead and try. She shouted hysterically, and in addition to anger, I felt shock and sadness welling up inside me. I stare intently at her face with wide eyes. There's not a trace of the bright and kind woman she used to be. Her distorted expression, looking down on us selfishly, is like that of a complete stranger, and I even feel afraid. How did things turn out this way? Unable to keep up with the situation, I am at a loss for words. Is this her true nature? Hey Heather, what's gotten into you? You've been talking about nothing but money. Jeffrey was your husband. You loved him, didn't you? Can't you show a little more tact? Fighting back the urge to burst into tears from the confusion, I stare up at Heather looking down at me with a terrifying expression. Jeffrey's portrait with a smiling face is displayed in the room. Why are we having this exchange in this situation? Huh? What do you mean by tact? Should I cry until my makeup runs? That's stupid. I never liked or loved that boring, overly serious guy. I only married him because I thought I wouldn't have to worry if I married a store manager at a big company. Her revelation hits me like a punch to the gut. Jeffrey and Heather always seemed so close, and I remember teasing them a few times, saying, "You two get along so well." And Jeffrey seemed to love her from the bottom of his heart. Yet it was all a lie. My fingertips tremble with frustration. I thought he would make even more money in the future, so it's too bad he died. But I can't cry pathetically like you. No way. I'm at a loss for words. That day, when I was distraught over his death, this woman was looking at me with such contempt. It was easy to get you to like me. Before I met him, I worked night shifts in the service industry, so I'm good at catering to older people. It felt nice to have you fooled so skillfully. I clench my trembling hands and glare at her as I stand up. Actually, I had intended to give all of Jeffrey's inheritance to her from the beginning. If a young wife suddenly loses her husband, she would be worried about her future, and we have our savings so far, so we won't have trouble getting by. But I can't forgive her for saying it like this. At this point, I don't want to easily hand over his inheritance. No, we'll discuss it through a lawyer. For now, just be quiet and focus on the funeral. I tell Heather in a strong voice. She clicks her tongue loudly, runs her fingers through her long hair, and leaves. Even though Heather claims to be a housewife, her appearance is strangely beautiful, and I can tell she spends money on her hair and skin. Many of her belongings seem to be from famous brands too. I thought she was a beautiful person even before they got married, but at that time she was also working, so I didn't feel anything was off. But now, she's not earning her own money. Thinking that she's obtaining all those things with his income makes me feel uncomfortable. Afterwards, the funeral proceeded as planned. He was a very loving son and our pride and joy. I hope he can be happy in heaven. With that wish, Thomas and I saw Jeffrey off in tears. Later, when I told Thomas about Heather, he instantly became furious. I can't forgive her for deceiving not only us, but Jeffrey all this time. I thought it would be our job to help support her life after this, but not anymore. He slams the table at home with all his might, his face bright red with anger, causing a cup placed there to topple over. I hurriedly wipe it up and nod at him with a serious expression. It feels like we're striking back at Jeffrey's enemy after his death. We absolutely won't let that woman have her way. And a week later, we decided to discuss the inheritance again with a lawyer present. We found out that Jeffrey, with his earnest and solid personality, had quite a lot of savings for his age without spending the salary he earned as a store manager frivolously. As soon as she hears that, Heather's eyes light up with excitement. Perhaps because she revealed her true colors once, she no longer tries to hide it, and the way she blatantly exposes her desires is unsightly. $100,000? Really? That's what I can inherit, right? If I remember correctly, the wife has the highest priority in inheritance, right? The lawyer suppresses her eager outburst and begins to explain in more detail. It's not just the deposits in the bank that are considered assets. The lawyer politely explained various details, but Heather, blinded by the deposits in front of her, didn't seem to be listening and was spaced out the whole time. As soon as the lawyer finished talking, Heather confronted us in a forceful tone. So, it's settled that I'm the one inheriting all that, right? I'm sure you two already have plenty of savings, and I still have a long life ahead of me. Okay? She's selfish and overbearing in every way. Hey, give up the inheritance. You don't need it, right? Her excessively pushy attitude overwhelms me, unpleasant as it is. Some time had passed since then, but it seems her feelings haven't changed after all. I had hoped she would reflect a little and be open to discussion, so having all of that shattered left me completely demotivated. She's dressed fashionably again today, her hair beautifully styled as if she just went to the salon, and her skin and eyes are glowing enough to tell she's using high-end cosmetics. The bag placed on the table as if to show off has a famous brand logo on it. It has hardly any signs of use, so it's probably new. Thomas, sitting next to me, is clenching his fists and looks like he's about to lunge at her at any moment, but he seems to be holding back somehow. It's impossible to persuade her at this rate. I didn't want this argument to drag on into an even longer dispute. We're in the depths of grief from losing Jeffrey, and I don't want to prolong this trouble any further with self-centered Heather over the inheritance. Exhausted both physically and mentally, I had no energy left to fight her anymore. Well, if you insist that much, fine. As you say, you're still young. I'm sure Jeffrey earned that money for his life with you, so I'll let you have the entire inheritance. Yes, all of it. When I say that weakly, Heather's face lights up. I knew it! Why not? The unsightliness of it makes me unintentionally dismiss her as shameless in my mind. The lawyer properly recorded our conversation, and with that, it was decided that Jeffrey's entire inheritance would go to this arrogant Heather. My husband and I head home together with disgruntled expressions, not speaking to each other. An indescribable unpleasant feeling was spreading in our hearts. From then on, we spent our days thinking about Jeffrey. That said, it's the usual life of Thomas going to work and me taking care of the house. But there are no more calls from Jeffrey. My voice no longer reaches him. Every time I realized that, I felt like crying from the sense of loss. And so, about 3 months passed. On days off, Thomas and I would go for walks in the nearby park or relax and drink coffee at home while reminiscing about Jeffrey. In the midst of such sad yet leisurely days, the phone at home rang one afternoon. The caller was an unexpected person. It was Heather. We haven't even spoken, let alone met, since the discussion with the lawyer. She probably has no more use for us, and we don't want to see her face either. So why did she suddenly contact us? I pressed the call button, wondering. Then, Heather's flustered voice came through from the other end of the line. Hey, listen. I got a repayment demand for debt sent to my house. It's $90,000. So that's what it was about, I realized. Actually, during the discussion with the lawyer, there was a concerning matter brought up. However, Heather at the time was completely carried away by the savings she would get her hands on and wasn't properly listening. Thomas and I knew that, but deliberately said nothing, gave up the inheritance, and let her have everything. It's all Jeffrey's debt. I never heard about this. Hey, do I have to pay this back? Did you know about it? Her loud, ranting voice was annoying, and I sighed. Jeffrey's entire estate has been inherited by you. That includes the obligation to repay debts, all of it. When I clearly state that, she lets out a disgruntled groan. The company Jeffrey worked for was indeed a major one, but it seems their business had been tough lately. The burden of that fell on the store managers of each location. Jeffrey was made to conduct business at his own expense under the company's orders. He was generating sales by buying the store's goods with his own money. Earnest as he was, he probably had a strong sense of loyalty to the company. Unable to refuse doing business at his own expense, he must have been following orders to protect the company while taking on a large amount of debt. When I explained that to her, she cried out. Debt from doing business at his own expense? I've never heard of such a thing. I knew you weren't listening. The lawyer properly explained it at the time. When I say that, she retorts. What do you mean you knew? If you knew I missed it, why didn't you tell me? Heather snapped back, her loud voice reverberating. Even if you say that, it can't be helped since you weren't listening. You said you wanted to inherit everything yourself after hearing the explanation through. I totally thought you would take on everything, including the debts. When I say that with a bit of spite, she grinds her teeth and throws a tantrum. But you could have checked with me. I consulted a lawyer myself, but apparently it's been 3 months since then, so I can't even give up the inheritance anymore. Even if I inherit $100,000 in cash, if there's $90,000 in debt, I only get $10,000. If you include interest and processing fees, it'll end up in the negative. This isn't how it was supposed to be. What are you going to do about it? To Heather, who was ranting on and on, I firmly told her. No matter what you say, I don't want to hear it anymore. Jeffrey is gone, and we're just strangers now. If you want to resent someone, resent yourself for being blinded by money. And before Heather could start saying anything else, I quickly hung up the phone. I couldn't help but sigh. Even at this point, what a troublesome woman she is. She thought she was getting a large inheritance, but instead she ended up with debt. She can feel as elated or flustered as she wants on her own, but I wish she would stop complaining to me when we have no relationship anymore. And to think that Jeffrey's wife, who has already gone to heaven, was such a mean-spirited woman, it still makes me sad. I wonder if Jeffrey in heaven is watching our exchange now. I wonder how he feels. In any case, what she does with the money she received and the debt is now up to her to deal with. She's already an adult, so we have no obligation to worry about her. We'll probably never speak to or see each other again. With that mindset, I decided to return to my normal life. I frequently visited Jeffrey's grave, cleaned his tombstone while reminiscing about old times, and offered flowers. Each time his grave got dirty from the rain, I would polish it clean. And then, a few weeks later, one day, the doorbell of our house rang. It was a weekday, and Thomas was away at work, so I stopped my housework and went to answer it. And there, standing with a distorted face looking like she was about to cry, was Heather, whom I thought I would never see again. "What brings you here to our house?" I asked. She pushed her way into the entrance of our house and then apologized. "Please, lend me money." For a moment, I felt dizzy. Why is this person always only concerned about money? She looked up at me with upturned eyes. "I can't finish paying off his debts. Right after inheriting the estate, I got a lump sum of money and got carried away spending it. I went on overseas trips, bought multiple bags I wanted, treated my friends to expensive meals. Because of that, I don't have enough money to pay it back, and now it's become my debt." "And so what?" I said coldly. Everything is entirely her own doing. Begging for Jeffrey's inheritance, getting carried away with the leftover savings, not listening to the talk about the debt, and spending all the money on luxuries. Before that, she did all of that herself. Why does she feel the need to tell me? Surely she doesn't think I'll lend her money after hearing that story. It's embarrassing as a fellow human being. "I consulted my parents first. But when I told them everything, they said it was my own fault and refused to help me. I have housing costs and living expenses to worry about, and I don't have any income since I was a housewife. Please, even a little, just $10,000, lend me some money." With a strong determination not to get involved, I told her, who was looking up at me, in a cold tone. "Wait, who are you?" "Huh?" Her face froze. "My deceased son Jeffrey's wife is already a stranger to me. This is trespassing and extortion. I'll call the police." Saying that, I took out my cell phone. She must have thought I was really going to call the police. She twisted her face into a mess, glared at me intensely for a moment, and then fled from our house as if running away. And I firmly closed the front door, determined to never get involved with her again. No job, accustomed to luxury, and drowning in debt. It's a fitting end for a greedy, evil woman who deceived Jeffrey and didn't even mourn the death of Jeffrey, who loved her. That night, when I told Thomas about it, he seemed to take it seriously. He set her phone number to reject calls on our home phone and each of our cell phones, and even informed our lawyer to have a restraining order issued against her. To be extra cautious, we also strongly warned each of our family members to never engage with her even if she showed up. After that, Heather ended up having to pay off the debt herself. At first, she was apparently looking for a full-time job, but she kept applying for high-paying positions beyond her qualifications and getting rejected. As time passed, the debt rapidly increased, and she eventually had to get by with a low-wage part-time job. Since the daytime job alone wasn't enough, she apparently started working a second job in the night service industry, but due to her age, she couldn't earn as much as she hoped and kept getting more and more haggard. Furthermore, unable to kick her luxury spending habit, she still couldn't stop splurging, making it difficult to escape the debt hell. In the end, she had to move out of her original apartment, and halfway through, she moved into an old, cheap apartment. And so, the seasons cycle back to winter. "It's cold," Thomas said. It was the anniversary of Jeffrey's death, and relatives had gathered to share a meal. "Yes. I hope Jeffrey is staying warm in heaven," I replied. I wonder if earnest and kind Jeffrey is still watching over us from heaven. I find myself suddenly hoping that he has met a good person there. A lot has happened, but we still have a future ahead of us. It's truly sad that Jeffrey passed before us, but let's continue living energetically together. When I smiled at him, he nodded back with a smile. From now on, we will keep living. Without being greedy, without putting on airs, cherishing the person next to us, living peacefully. The smiling face of Jeffrey in the framed photo in the room looks so very warm. "What are you doing?" "That's why that woman's daughter is no good. She's slow to learn, slow to move, and clumsy. I can't stand to watch her." It seems that my mother-in-law, Sally, has a grudge against my mother, and she has been targeting me as well, which is truly unpleasant to the point where I want to cut ties with her. However, I've been tolerating it because I get along well with my father-in-law, Joe, and my brother-in-law, Nick. But I've been putting up with it because she gets along well with Joe and Nick. That was until Sally started playing her schemes. My name is Mary, a 32-year-old housewife. Life was full of various hardships until I married my husband, Tom. We met in middle school. I was living in poverty because my parents' company went bankrupt. On the other hand, Tom was the youngest son of a well-established upscale restaurant owner. His mother-in-law never faced bankruptcy, and he was known as the richest kid in our class. It should have been the other way around. At that time, I thought so and was cold to Tom. But as we were in the same committee and got closer, "I'm the youngest son, so my parents don't expect much from me," he said sadly. Seeing Tom like that made me realize that having money doesn't necessarily mean happiness. From then on, I was drawn to Tom, and on the day of our middle school graduation, I confessed to him, and we started dating, continuing even after becoming working adults. However, one day while on a date with Tom, we unexpectedly bumped into Sally. I had hardly seen Sally, maybe only at entrance and graduation ceremonies, so it was almost like meeting her for the first time. "Nice to meet you. I'm Mary, dating Tom." I greeted her, but Sally didn't return the greeting and looked at me sternly. "I know. I've had your background checked. It's fine to date Tom for fun, but don't think you can become a part of our mother-in-law." "Mom, why would you say that?" Tom retorted strongly, but Sally ignored him and left. I was trembling with shock and fear, unable to look at Sally's face, and just looked down. However, Tom comforted me, and unexpectedly, this incident strengthened our resolve to definitely get married. Since then, I've gone with Tom to his mother-in-law's house for mother-in-law meetings. But no matter how much we asked, Sally refused to let me enter the property, so we kept visiting until we were allowed. However, mentally, it becomes tough when the situation of being turned away from the in-laws' house once a week continues for a year. Then one day, Sally, who always comes out to refuse us, was bedridden due to illness, and Nick, the eldest son, came out in her place. "Mom's asleep, so come on in." Nick casually led us into the house, ignoring Sally's opinion. The house, belonging to a mother-in-law that runs a high-end restaurant, had a stylish and pleasant interior. Joe was in the restaurant's kitchen, and "I'll tell him to come home after noon," Nick said, and until then, the three of us chatted. Tom seems to be close with Nick. When Nick talked about their childhood, Tom would get embarrassed, and it seemed like a fun brotherly relationship. Then Sally walked into the living room. "What? I told you to turn away any women Tom brings." Sally spoke strongly, but she was coughing, seemingly unwell. "There's no need to turn her away. Isn't it rude for Mom not to meet someone who's been coming for a year?" "Maybe that's true, but..." Sally, unable to say more, sighed and left the living room. Nick then politely apologized to me. "Mary, I'm sorry about Mom." While this was happening, Joe came back and entered the living room, taking off his hat to greet us. "Welcome. So, you're Tom's fiancé. What a lovely girl. We all welcome you here." I had thought Joe, being a chef, might be a difficult person, but he wasn't. Not knowing this, I nervously returned a forced smother-in-law, thinking he might be hiding his true self. It turns out only Sally is against the marriage, while Joe is rather welcoming. Though we run a high-end restaurant, we're not a strict mother-in-law. I don't necessarily want the kids to take over the business. Doing what they want and marrying who they love to lead a life without regrets is what's most important. Joe shared his opinion. Then Nick added, "It would be okay with just relatives, but Mom insists the marriage partner must be from a high-status mother-in-law." David might not know, but Mary and Tom have been turned away by Mom every week for the past year. Hearing this, Joe's expression changed. "A year? If that's true, it's unforgivable. Bring Sally here." Nick went to call Sally, and she staggered into the living room, clearly unwell. "What now?" "I'm not feeling well today." "So be it. Let's keep it short. You've been turning away Mary, who's taken the trouble to visit our house, for a year." "Well, it's because her parents ran a company, went bankrupt, and even got into bankruptcy. She doesn't fit in with our mother-in-law." "So what? What does her parents' bankruptcy have to do with her? Isn't it wrong to oppose for such a reason?" Then Sally, momentarily at a loss for words, brought up something I never expected. "The thing is, Mary's mom was my classmate during my school days. I didn't like her. That's why I didn't want to become relatives with her and was waiting for the two of you to give up." Everyone present, not just me, was surprised by this revelation. "That's no reason to oppose a marriage. Let's proceed with the mother-in-law meeting." Joe said that, and finally, Tom and I took a step towards marriage. The mother-in-law meeting, held at Joe's upscale restaurant, progressed in a cordial atmosphere. My mother seemed to remember Sally. "Oh, Sally, isn't it? Long time no see." She greeted Sally, but Sally, perhaps still not accepting. "Long time no see." It was cold in her response. Later, my mother told me that Sally used to be the top student in their class, while my mother had the worst grades. Sally often looked down on my mother, saying, "Poor you, not even understanding such a question. I'm so glad I wasn't born as you," and would spread bad things about my mother to other classmates. So my mother was a bit worried about my marrying Tom. "I believe a woman's happiness lies in marrying the person she loves. I'm a bit worried about Tom's mom, but let Tom protect you." Her strong words made me vow to be happy with Tom. But my married life was constantly disrupted by Sally. Originally, both Tom and I were company employees, but Sally forced me to quit my job, saying it was because I was getting married. Tom argued against Sally, but her insistence was so strong that, well, I didn't really love my job anyway. I gave in. Then Sally started coming over every day, teaching me how to do household chores in detail. If I didn't do as Sally wanted, she would say, "What are you doing? That's why that woman's daughter is no good. She's slow to learn, slow to move, and clumsy. I can't stand to watch her." And put me down by bringing up my mother. "Could you please not talk about my mom?" I retorted, but then she would say, "Oh, you're talking back now? I don't want someone like you with Tom. Will you divorce him?" And present me with divorce papers. Only Tom's section was father-in-lawed out, and I cried when I first saw it, believing it was real. Sally would leave in the evening, and when Tom came home, "Are you really wanting a divorce, signing divorce papers just because Sally told you to?" I confronted him, crying, "I don't know anything about divorce papers. I've never written anything like that." Tom insisted strongly, so the next time Sally brought out the divorce papers as a threat, I decided to check them more carefully. The handwriting looked similar in Lavar, but slightly different from his usual writing. "Sally, could I have those divorce papers? I want to go to the police to verify they're fake. You know, forging official documents is quite a serious crime." After I said that, Sally stopped bringing the divorce papers, but she continued to mock me for being poor and having bankrupt parents, making our mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship very strained. Even now, 3 years into our marriage, it seems Sally still doesn't like me. One day, when Sally came to our house, she surprisingly seemed calm, so I immediately became cautious. Then, "Mary, I'm sorry for everything I've done to you," Sally said. "What?" "I've been reflecting on how horribly I've treated you. So, as a gesture of reconciliation, would you like to join a dinner party I'm hosting? It's going to be a women-only gathering at our restaurant, kind of like a ladies' night. It won't be just any women, but wives of company presidents and women who run their own businesses will be there. I also want to make amends with your mom, so please come together." She invited me to the event. Sally seemed genuinely repentant. There's no reason not to forgive someone who is truly sorry. Certainly, there are countless grievances from Sally delaying our marriage by a year, disrupting the married life I envisioned, and making unpleasant comments about my parents. But since Sally was apologizing, I decided to forgive her just this once. "I'll let my mom know." That day, Sally left promptly without lingering, and I believed she truly had repented. When I told my mother about it, she said, "We had our issues in the past, but now we're both parents of children, so we might get along. But if that's the case, I'd like to meet just you, me, and her. It feels odd to be with people I don't know." Initially reluctant, I relayed this to Sally and explained the reason. However, Sally seemed unsatisfied and called my mother directly, persuading her until she agreed to go. After the call with Sally, my mother phoned me. Somehow I ended up agreeing to go. "I'll go this time, but this will be the last." I found it a bit odd. Would someone who is repentant and wants to apologize really insist on someone's presence despite their reluctance? If Sally had ulterior motives, it would make sense for her to insist, but I couldn't sister-in-law doubt her. I decided to trust Sally, who seemed to have genuinely repented and apologized that day. On the day of the event, I finished a light breakfast and arrived at the restaurant around noon, excited. The meeting time was 1 p.m., but no one was there, so I waited a bit longer. After waiting for 30 minutes and still no one showing up, I called Sally. "Sally, where are you? We're already at the restaurant." "I'm sorry. Some of the attendees needed a ride, and I got a bit lost." You're driving? Sorry about that. It's fine, I'm on speaker. My phone is on the passenger seat. I'll be there soon, just wait a bit longer, Sally said and ended the call. After another 30 minutes with no sign of anyone, I called Sally again. Sally, are you still lost? I finally found the way, but there seems to be an accident, and I'm stuck in traffic. I think I'll be there in about 30 minutes. Is it okay if we go inside first? No. Actually, I wanted to keep it a secret, but there's a surprise set up in the reserved private room, and I don't want it to be seen. Also, I've informed the restaurant, so don't worry about the time. Understanding her point, my mother and I continued to wait outside the restaurant. An hour later, 2 hours after we began waiting, Nick arrived at the restaurant. I heard someone was waiting outside, but I didn't expect it to be Mary and her mom. What's going on? Nick appeared to be working, wearing a white chef's jacket and hat. We're waiting for Sally. She said she got lost and then caught in traffic. Do you believe that? That's Mom's lie. She's been dining in a private room with friends, already on dessert. What? Did they start despite missing 2 people? No, the count was exactly right. Then, my mother, usually gentle and calm, showed a terrifying expression I had never seen before. Would you mind taking us to that private room? Nick, turning pale, led us to Sally's room. As Nick quietly tried to open the door, my mother burst in with a loud bang. Everyone looked surprised, and Sally was initially shocked, but then... Oh, you found out? Thank you for waiting 2 hours. I told you to come 30 minutes later than the actual time. Wouldn't it be funny if a miserable mother and daughter were standing outside when we left? But now that it's come to this, there's no helping it. This place is a social venue for the winners. Could the poor people please leave? She looked down on us, smirking and laughing. However, Sally was the only one laughing. None of her about 8 friends were. Then, my mother, with a bright smother-in-law, responded. Is that so? How interesting. I recognize everyone here. Would you mind conveying a message to them? Cancel our deals. Deals? Yes. I know all these people. Some are company owners, others are wives of presidents. As my mother said this, Sally burst into laughter. Amazing, isn't it? You were a president's wife over 10 years ago, right? Are these from that time? But who wants to associate with someone whose company went under? What are you talking about? Yes, my husband once bankrupted his company and is now an employee, but I started my own company 5 years ago and made it big. I'm in business with these ladies here. It was a surprise to see them. You can't do that. You were always bad at school and clumsy. You'll bankrupt it again, won't you? Nobody knows when they might go bankrupt, but for now, it's growing well. Why are you stuck in the past? Don't compare me to my student days. My mother shouted this, and one of the attendees stepped forward. I didn't know about this. My apologies for any disrespect. But my colleagues and I here were unaware of this. We would like to continue a good relationship with your company. She smother-in-lawed and shook hands with my mother, then turned to Sally. Given this, we'll take our leave today. Asserting their disassociation, the women all left the room. Some even left their desserts unfinished, which I felt a bit sorry for. I thought this incident might make Sally reflect a bit, but suddenly she grabbed my arm. Mary! How dare you embarrass me like this, as a daughter-in-law? Angry, I immediately shook off her hand. Please stop! And I showed a reaction of rejection. I believed you when you said you were sincerely sorry and had reflected. But this treatment is the worst, don't you think? I can never believe any apology from you again. I won't be fooled by such tricks, nor will I accept any invitations from you ever again. I had never spoken back to Sally this firmly before, so she seemed quite surprised. I didn't mean it like that. I just wanted you to respect me. I wanted to show you what happens when you mock me. I didn't think you'd get so angry. Please forgive me. Sally apologized again, but I was no longer willing to forgive. I wonder what method you'll use to deceive me next time. It's scary to think about. After that, Sally had nothing to say in return. Would you like to have a meal? I'll prepare a private room. Please wait here. Nick kindly offered and asked us to sit and wait. Both my mother and I, being very hungry, accepted his kind offer. Then, my mother and I enjoyed a lavish course meal, having a wonderful time. Later, the incident was relayed to Joe and Tom by Nick, and Sally seemed to have been severely reprimanded by everyone. Especially Tom, who declared to Sally, "I can't stand it anymore. I can't think of someone who hurts my beloved and her mom as my mother. Don't ever associate with me again." I was deeply grateful to Tom for standing up for us. Even Tom's brother, who lives far away, despised Sally for this incident, indicating just how much her actions were against human decency. Joe was particularly appalled and ended up handing Sally divorce papers and kicking her out of the house. Although Sally won't face financial difficulties even if divorced, due to property division, she's now living a lonely life, despised by her sons and abandoned by her relatives. Right after Sally stopped bothering me, I discovered I was pregnant. It seems the stress from Sally had been affecting me. This made me think that Sally had dug her own grave, and in a way, I was thankful for that. Tom was overjoyed about the pregnancy and said, "I'm sorry for all the stress you've endured. From now on, I'll do my best to protect our child and our whole mother-in-law." His words father-in-lawed me with happiness. I too resolved to protect and cherish the happiness of our precious famother-in-law.at that time. I thought so and was cold to Tom. One day, 6 months after Jane, who married into a family of doctors, started living with her in-laws, I was relaxing in the living room when I received a call on my mobile phone, which I had left nearby. It had been a while since I last saw Jane's name pop up on my screen once or twice a month, and I hurried to answer the call. "Jane? Hello? Can you hear me? What happened, not contacting me for half a year?" "Mom, help me." With a voice so frail it seemed squeezed out, that's all she said before I heard something fall on the other side of the phone. "What? Jane? Jane? Where are you now? At Susan's house?" "I'm so starving, I can't take it anymore. I want to see Tom and Emma. Mom and Dad." I barely made out her choppy voice. It was clear she must have dropped the phone, and her voice faded away. As I was getting agitated, my husband Jim, who had been working from home, came down from the second floor. "What's wrong?" "A call from Jane?" "Jim! Jane is in danger!" Jim immediately grabbed his car keys and wallet and dashed out, and I hurried into the car while keeping the line open. "Jane, wait! We're coming now!" Despite the early spring chill, we forgot to turn on the car's heater as we rushed over. Upon arriving at my daughter's in-laws, Jim and I pushed our way inside somewhat forcefully. There we found Jane, lying weakly. "My name is Mary, 55 years old. I'm a housewife living with my husband Jim, who is a year older than me. Jim and I met through a mutual college friend's introduction. We discovered we both loved movies while having dinner with friends, and hit it off right then and there. Since then, we've watched various genres of movies together, from action to romantic comedies and horror, and reminiscing about discussing our thoughts over meals remains a fond memory. After dating for about a year, we got married. Jim joined a company after graduating from college and has been working there ever since. Now, with retirement looming, he often muses over a drink about how we might spend our time. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to live a quiet life in the countryside now that Jane has moved out. Jane is our daughter. She was conceived soon after we got married, and despite a difficult birth, she was born safely and has grown up well. I once told Jane about the time when she was born. I shared how the nurses took care of Jane on my behalf, how they made sure I wasn't burdened, and how they helped me. Hearing this, Jane seemed to realize the importance and preciousness of her own life and her mother's life, and she declared she wanted to become a nurse. I want to be a nurse and support babies being born and women like Mom. She was still in middle school but soon started attending a cram school and quickly made it into a selective high school. From there, she relentlessly pursued a career in nursing through high school and college, her determination both heartening and bittersweet for me to watch. Jim felt the same way, and when our only daughter decided to live alone upon entering university, he strongly opposed it. No way! What if she gets involved with some weird guy? There are suspicious people out there these days. That kind of person is always around. Jim, don't be such a helicopter parent. I hate the idea of her commuting to university by train. The argument between me and Jane and my husband was truly stressful, but eventually, Jane started living on her own. The night Jane left, only I knew that Jim quietly cried over his drink. Jane spent her university breaks working part-time jobs and coming home. Her innate cheerfulness and positive attitude toward challenges surely guided her on her path to becoming a nurse. Remembering this, I also enjoy a drink with Jim. That's true. Maybe somewhere known for its local craft beer would be nice? That sounds good, but Jane complains when we drink too much. Jim says with a wry smile. Jane completed her training, passed the national licensing exam, and became a nurse. Then, unexpectedly, she announced she was getting married. The man's name was Tom, someone she met during her training. Tom had finished his medical training, proposed to Jane, and she accepted. It's been a while since I proposed, but I'm happy to meet you today. I want to build a happy home with her. Please allow us to get married. Jim and I were taken aback by the sudden news, but seeing his handsome and straightforward demeanor, I thought he seemed sincere. Predictably, Jim was visibly shocked but weakly consented to the marriage. I see. Jim must have seen how well Jane and Tom suited each other, unable to object when he saw Jane smiling happily beside him. Though he didn't cry that night, he definitely shed tears at the wedding. Tom's family comes from a line of doctors, with his father also a doctor, still working at a nearby hospital. He was cheerful and kind towards Jane, but it seemed that Jane didn't quite get along with her Maëlle, Susan and Ciel, Anne. I overheard Jane on the phone once, saying, "They accuse me of being after their money. Saying I became a nurse just because it pays well and such mean things. Why? Because I come from an ordinary family. It's really rude." But you and Tom are doing well, right? Yeah. Sometimes we can't see each other because of my night shifts, but I'm still working too, so it's mutual. We both have the same time off next, so we're going to the beach. Her voice brightened as she spoke, making me happy and reminding me of my own early days of marriage. Thinking this must be the happiest time for her, I said, "Have fun," and hung up the phone. It's still fresh in my memory when Jane and Tom's daughter, Emma, was born. Named Emma, both Jim and I were delighted every time we received photos of our granddaughter. Jane's beauty has passed on to her. Her nose is just like Jane's. Following Emma's birth, Jane became a full-time housewife, busy with household chores and childcare every day. However, not everything was joyful. Around Emma's second birthday, Tom's father passed away. Tom shed frustrated tears at the funeral. He was sick. It shocked me he kept it from me, but I think he must have been prepared. That day, the cold rain quietly soaked all the relatives gathered. After the funeral settled down, Susan proposed living together to Tom. We have spare rooms, and it's lonely by myself. I also want to see my granddaughter Emma. Tom and Jane hadn't considered living with his parents. We don't have to live together. Tom declined initially, but Susan brought up the idea every time they met. Living together would save on rent. Plus, it would bring you a bit closer to Jane's parents, right? Indeed, Susan's house was only a few minutes away by car from ours. Jane and Tom lived closer to Tom's hospital, away from both our houses. Thinking of having a second child and the possibility of getting some help with childcare, Jane and Tom accepted Susan's proposal to live together. When Jane told me this over the phone, I felt a bit anxious. But aren't you and Susan and not getting along so well? Are you sure it's going to be okay? And is living by herself in an apartment nearby, so it's just Susan at home, and it will be fine. I'll manage. With that, Jane started her life living with her in-laws. However, Anne, who was supposed to be living in an apartment, was always at the in-laws' house, not working, and just living day by day. Jane, long time no see, greeted Anne, seemingly tipsy from drinking during the day. And weren't you living on your own? Jane asked, to which she laughed. Is it so strange that I'm at my parents' house? I'm job hunting, so it's fine to be here for a bit. Oh, Mary, can you make something to eat? Something simple is fine. However, there seemed to be no sign that she was actually looking for a job afterward. I was curious about how she was managing her apartment rent, but it appeared Susan was sending her money to cover it every month. Jane became anxious about the future, and her fears soon materialized. Jane, as the wife in this house, you need to work hard. Start with cleaning, laundry. And of course, cooking daily meals is a given for a housewife. That's how Susan's harassment began. When Jane cleaned or did the laundry, Susan would complain about every little thing, like not wringing the rag properly or hanging shirts incorrectly. Jane, this is how you fold clothes. She would sometimes instruct. I know how to do it. But your way is like this. It's completely different. Susan would insist, although Jane couldn't see any difference, so she let it go. Regarding cooking, Susan would complain about the seasoning being too strong. I only eat food that's delicately seasoned and light. She claimed, even going so far as to throw away soup Jane had made. After living like this for a while, and also started harassing Jane, finding any opportunity to complain. Jane, the bath isn't ready. It's still daytime. You're taking a bath now? I can take it whenever I want, can't I? You're so slow, Jane. Such was the situation. That's the situation as I understood it, from Jane's phone calls and messages, but gradually, she complained less, and I thought maybe she was getting used to living with her in-laws. However, suddenly, Jane's communications stopped. She used to call once or twice a month, but then there was nothing. I tried calling several times, but often couldn't get through. When I finally did, Jane's voice sounded forcedly cheerful. I'm fine. Don't worry, she said. It made me even more worried, but I didn't want to interfere too much, so I didn't press further. Occasionally, I still received some contact from her. "Why don't you come back here for a bit? I'll talk to Susan. Come back with Emma." Jane would decline with a tired but cheerful laugh. Issues with in-laws happen in every family, right? I'm dealing with it, so don't worry. "Jane, are you really okay? Your voice sounds hoarse." "Oh, just a little cold." Her awkward response made me feel uneasy. "I should go. I need to prepare dinner." Jane hurriedly ended the call. After that, I tried contacting her several times, but I got no response from Jane, nor did my messages got read. One night, while having a drink with Jim, I brought up that Jane had been acting strangely lately. Maybe it's just a coincidence? Wasn't she just sick with a cold? I wonder if it really was a cold. She always said colds hit her in the nose, but I didn't hear her sniffling at all. Then we have no choice but to go directly to Susan's house and check on her ourselves. That weekend, Jim and I actually visited Susan's house. When we rang the doorbell, Jane came out to greet us, and we were happy to see her again after several months. Her face, though, seemed thinner than before, and her smile quickly turned to darkness when Susan and appeared behind her. "What is this? Showing up unannounced. Don't you have any common sense?" Poor Jane, raised by such people. And said with a laugh, but Susan, without reprimanding her, was desperate to get us off the property. "Please leave. I'll call the police for trespassing if you don't." Susan, furiously trying to shoo us away with a broom, was visibly angry. Despite being chased off, Jim and I returned to our car, feeling that something was wrong. "Was Jane always that thin? She used to complain about gaining a little weight." "Is she not being fed properly? Could it be abuse?" "Is that even possible?" We went to the police to discuss our concerns, but were told that without seeing Jane or witnessing abuse, they couldn't do anything. "It'll be too late if we wait until something happens." I insisted, but Jim stopped me, and we went home for the day. Half a year passed in this state when one day, as I was relaxing in the living room, my mobile phone rang with a call from Jane. I hurried to answer it. "Jane? Hello. Can you hear me? What happened, not contacting me for half a year?" Mom." Jane's voice was a weak groan. "Help me." After saying just that in a weakened voice, I heard something fall. "What? Jane? Jane? Where are you now? At Susan's house?" "I'm so starving, I can't take it anymore. I want to see Tom and Emma. Mom and Dad." I barely made out her choppy voice. She must have dropped the phone, and her voice faded away. As I was getting agitated, Jim, who had been working from home, came down from the second floor. "What's wrong? A call from Jane?" "Jim! Jane is in danger!" Jim immediately grabbed his car keys and wallet, and I hurried into the car while keeping the line open. "Jane, wait! We're coming now!" Forgetting to turn on the car's heater in the slight chill, we rushed over. When we rang Susan's house's doorbell, Susan came out and was startled to see us. "You two again." Expecting to be turned away again, we entered the house before Susan could finish speaking. "Who is it?" One night, slightly tipsy and blocked our way, but Jim and I pushed past her and proceeded inside without hesitation. "Jane! Where are you, Jane? You're here, right? And Emma? We have to take Emma back too." "Emma?" Susan and followed us, but we didn't care. "What's the meaning of this? Stop it, enough." While I was calling for Emma, she noticed the commotion and came out. "I'm here." "Good. Where's Mom? Do you know where she is? Over there. Emma led us with her small steps to Jane's room. Along the way, Mom looking forward to seeing Grandma and Grandpa, Emma said. Puzzled, we followed her and arrived in front of a locked storage room. It was a simple lock added afterward, and Jim and I broke in. Jane! I screamed. Jane was lying weakly inside, her cheeks hollow, her limbs thin, clearly not having eaten for days. Jane couldn't respond, only occasionally moaning weakly. I'm calling for an ambulance. You're overreacting. I attended to Jane while Jim called the police and ambulance. After the call, Jim confronted Susan. Why would you do this? The answer came not from Susan or Anne, but from Emma standing nearby. It's discipline, she said. Discipline. This isn't discipline. Soon the ambulance arrived, and Jim and I explained to the paramedics that Jane was too weak to speak, had been left in the storage, and likely hadn't eaten properly. Sensing the severity from Jane's frail condition, a paramedic said, Understood. We'll transport her to the hospital immediately, and asked me to accompany them. Wait! Her husband is a doctor. He works at... I mentioned the hospital name, asking if they could take her there. The paramedics contacted the hospital, and fortunately, they agreed to accept her, so the ambulance quickly set off. Siren blaring towards the hospital. Arriving at the hospital, Tom, having been informed of the emergency admission, was waiting, and I confronted him in a near frenzy. What have you done? Confused, Tom was approached by nurses trying to separate us. Amidst the commotion, with people watching, I didn't hold back in telling Tom about Jane's condition. I will never forgive this. Please wait. This is the first time I'm hearing of this. I thought she seemed a bit off lately, but she always laughed it off, saying she was fine. Tom often stayed away from home overnight due to night shifts and helping at associated hospitals, so he rarely saw Jane and had left her care entirely to Susan and Anne. Eventually, Jane had to be hospitalized for a while. Tom, angry at himself for not noticing and at Susan and Anne for their actions, informed Jane's doctor of the seriousness of the situation and decided to call the police. The next day, when Jim visited Jane's hospital room, she was able to speak, though she looked painfully frail within 4 drip. Regretting not taking her out of that house sooner and apologizing for not noticing her situation. We listened as Jane recounted everything. It started with verbal abuse and escalated to taking away her mobile phone and computer, becoming increasingly malicious. Yet Jane, with her inherent brightness and positivity, tried to endure, smiling at Tom whenever he came home late or after a long absence. However, this seemed to irritate Susan and Anne, whose harassment escalated when Tom was frequently away at night shifts or training sessions. Jane didn't seek Tom's help because Susan had threatened her not to tell. If I said anything, they'd bully Emma. Indeed, there were instances where Emma was pinched on the cheek or deliberately not given food. Jane had reportedly pleaded, I'll endure it, so please don't hurt Emma, asking them not to lay a hand on Emma. For 6 months, Jane and Emma were separated, with Jane only receiving food and water once a day and kept in a storage room otherwise. Jane attempted to escape once but was caught by Anne at the entrance and severely beaten, making further escape attempts impossible. Fortunately, she had managed to keep an old mobile phone and charger hidden, which was not taken from her. Jane documented everything that happened, including daily abuses, in videos and messages at night. Where is it? Under the bed in the storage room where I was. Based on this information, the police later recovered the evidence. The police, using this evidence, arrested Susan and Anne for imprisoning Jane over a long period. This incident caused Jim to lose trust in Tom, and for the time being, Emma would stay with Jim and me. We can't let Emma suffer the same fate as Jane. We'll be watching you closely from now on. Yes. I'm sorry. I won't make excuses for not realizing the terrible things my mother and were doing to Jane while I was away. Tom deeply apologized. As for Jane, since her hospitalization, she gradually recovered both physically and mentally. Each visit to the hospital showed her cheeks becoming fuller, and she laughed happily about gaining weight on her upper arms. She was discharged about 3 months later, into the warm sunlight that felt a bit too bright. After her discharge, Jane returned to her parents' home, where she, Jim, Jane, and Emma began living together. We had assumed she would certainly divorce after such an ordeal, but after Emma had gone to bed one night, Jane said something unexpected. You know, I'm not thinking about getting a divorce. Jim and I were shocked. Perhaps seeing our confusion, Jane slowly explained. At first, I was fed up with Susan and thought about divorcing him. But Tom was always kind and warm. During her hospital stay, Tom visited her daily after work, apologizing on behalf of his mother and sister, and promised never to let such a thing happen again. I will protect you, he assured. He also worked to ensure Susan and were punished by gathering evidence at home and getting his colleagues to write thorough medical reports. Tom talked about cutting ties with his family and said he'd follow any conditions my parents set until they could forgive him, Jane said. Do you believe him? I do. That's why I really want to live with Tom and Emma again. Jane looked directly into Jim's eyes as she spoke, her words and expression showing no doubt. However, Jim and I couldn't easily accept this and told Tom that we opposed the idea of Jane and Emma living with him for the time being, even after arranging a meeting to discuss it. Surprisingly, Tom accepted our stipulation without argument. I understand both Jane's and your feelings. I've done something unforgivable and will accept any punishment until I can live with Jane and Emma again. Later, Jim retired, and we moved to the countryside with Jane and Emma. Something we had talked about doing after retirement, but never expected to happen so soon. Isn't this a bit hasty? I asked Jim before moving, but he shook his head. I can't settle down knowing their house is nearby. Meanwhile, the young couple continued to persuade Jim to let them live as a family again. Desperate for approval, Tom heard from Jane about a closed clinic in our new town and immediately came to check it out. It was a small clinic, previously run by an elderly doctor specializing in internal medicine and pulmonology, retiring due to age. The clinic was conveniently located near a bus stop and had good access to the train station, with most facilities already in place. Tom, who had specialized in internal medicine, decided to leave his previous hospital, purchased the closed clinic, and successfully opened his own practice. At the clinic, Jane returned to work as a nurse, starting her days early and working reduced hours so she could be home by the evening. The clinic is so close to home that it's only a 5-minute drive away. On the clinic's days off, Tom comes over, and we spend time dining and playing with Emma, Jane, and me. Jim still keeps a stern eye on Tom, but lately, he's started to watch over him more gently. I hope for a reconciliation between Jim and them soon and showcase my cooking skills on weekends. How's it going lately? Jim asks gruffly, but his voice carries a hint of kindness. It's nice being with Jane and Emma. And being able to drink with Jim. Don't get too comfortable. Jim and Tom have even started to enjoy a drink together in the evenings. Joanna, it's about Walton's memorial dinner, but I doubt anyone will show up. It's my wedding day, so everyone prefers a celebration. What do you mean? My Sael, Carolina, intentionally set her wedding date to coincide with the anniversary of our grandson's passing, a year after his death. Come on, Joanna, you've become so forgetful without Walton that you can't even understand English anymore. I was infuriated by Carolina's unapologetic demeanor. I was fed up with Carolina's manipulative words and actions, and my husband, Darren, seemed indifferent. Well, for me, seeing my sister in her wedding dress is more important, so you can go to the memorial dinner alone. Faced with Carolina and Darren's cold attitudes, I came up with a plan. All right, I'll consider what you said. Today, after 25 years as a housewife, Joanna, I saw a text from Darren and felt down again. Staying over there again? I muttered to myself. Darren works at his father's company and is so busy that he often stays at his family home near the company instead of our house. It was foolish of me to hope he might come home early today, since it's my birthday. I sighed while preparing an unusually lavish dinner. Maybe he's just really busy. I talked to the sky, trying to convince myself. Though we met through a friend's introduction, Darren has always prioritized his family home over me. I tried to dismiss the thought that my in-laws must have said something, prompted by Darren's frequent, "I'll be staying at my parents' house." I want to trust Darren, but even on the rare days he is home, we are invariably interrupted by calls from his sister, Carolina, summoning him frequently. Carolina, Darren's sister, is 17 years younger than him and, according to him, indescribably cute. Darren would always tell me, "I'll definitely spend my next day off with you and the kids," a promise that never materialized, making me feel like Carolina was disrupting our family life. As I was about to prepare dinner, my motivation drained, staring at a carrot when my son, Morris, called. "Mom? Happy birthday!" "Morris, thank you." Morris's casual words warmed my heart, and I struggled to hold back tears. "Mom, is it like that again today?" Morris, who married at 23 and now lives with his wife, Rothy, has known since childhood that Darren seldom comes home. Seeing me clearly downcast because Darren hasn't come home, Morris, who grew up witnessing this, still worries about me and calls, even now that he's grown. Especially today, on my birthday, when he learned Darren wouldn't be coming home again, Morris said with an unusually serious tone. "Mom, you must be feeling lonely without Dad, right?" "Yes, I am." "How about we come to live with you?" "What?" I was thrilled by Morris's suggestion, but worried that Rothy might not agree. I casually mentioned it to Rothy before, and she seemed happy about it. Morris, sensing my anxiety, responded with a clear and cheerful voice. "Really? Rothy's okay with it?" "Of course. She likes the food you make. She said she'd be happy to eat it every day." "Thank you. Then, I'll prepare your room and ask Dad if it's okay." I usually expected Darren to ignore this, but I felt like I received a birthday present from Morris, thinking he might listen this time. A ray of sunshine seemed to break through my gloom. Later, Morris and Rothy moved into our house. Even on the day they moved in, Darren didn't come home, but I was so happy they were here that I hardly minded. When I put effort into cooking, both Morris and, of course, Rothy were happy, making our meals always lively and enjoyable. Though Darren rarely came home, their presence meant I didn't feel lonely and enjoyed peaceful days. Then one day, Rothy felt unwell and decided to go to the hospital. It had been 4 months since they moved in with us, and she had never been seriously sick or injured before, so I was filled with anxiety. Morris's face, tense despite saying it'll be okay as he left for the hospital with Rothy, stuck in my mind. I tried to shake off the bad feeling by putting more energy into my chores than usual. However, my anxiety soon vanished. "Mom!" While I was hanging laundry on the balcony, Morris was coming home, waving at me with the biggest smile. "Welcome back, both of you. How did it go?" Rothi smiled and gave me a cute okay sign, gently stroking her belly. "Could it be?" "Yes. I'm pregnant." "Wow. Congratulations." I felt so full of warmth and joy, as if every cell in my body was trembling with happiness. Leaving the laundry halfway done, I went out to them. "Mom, you came out for us?" "Of course, I'm thrilled just thinking about our first grandchild. I was told it would be difficult for me to get pregnant, so I'm really happy." Rothi lovingly placed her hand on her belly. "Rothi, congratulations. Feel free to lean on me as much as you need." "Thank you." From that day on, it was a whirlwind of activity. We had to gather everything needed for Rothi and the baby, organize the house, and there was plenty to do. Darren would occasionally join me for shopping, but inevitably, if Carolina called, he'd make excuses and head back to his family home, no matter where we were. Rothi's belly grew noticeably, but 3 months before her due date, something went wrong. "Rothi, are you okay?" Morris called out desperately, but seeing Rothi in so much pain, he decided to call an ambulance. Soon after, the ambulance arrived, and Rothi was carried away on a stretcher. "I'll go with Rothi, so could you, Mom, come later, please?" "Of course, I'll gather what's needed and take a taxi." Morris nodded briefly, then got into the ambulance with Rothi, heading to the hospital. I need to hurry, too. I packed a bag with essentials for Rothi's imminent birth. "I'll call Dad, see if I can get the day off work." Darren, standing worried, said something unusual, indicating his concern. "Really? You can do that?" "Yeah. It's an emergency with our first grandchild, no time to work." Darren quickly made the call and was easily excused. While Darren was on the phone, I arranged a taxi and locked up the house. We arrived at the hospital, and heading to Morris, we heard, "Rothi will have a cesarean section." "What should I do? I'm really anxious." "If you're not strong, Morris, Rothi will feel your anxiety." "You're right. I'm going to be a dad." How long had it been since Rothi entered the operating room? The red in surgery sign seemed to loom for hours. "It's taking a long time." Darren started shaking his knees intensely, almost as if to say he took off work for this. "Rothi is fighting hard." "Yes, and if you look so worried, the baby will be startled when born." With a furrowed brow, Darren's irritation grew, and he silently went somewhere. "He went to make a call." Yes. It was clear to us that despite taking time off to be here, Darren's frustration with the situation led him to call Carolina. As Morris and I grew increasingly anxious, Darren returned with a slightly relieved expression, glanced at the operating room, but sat down silently on the bench. "Rothi!" Morris murmured with a mix of worry and anxiety. "I'm worried about Rothi and the baby. It's been so long." "Yes, I didn't have a cesarean, so I'm not sure. It's worrying." In the heavy atmosphere, the operating room door finally opened, and the doctor came out. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Both mother and child are safe." "Great, my precious time was wasted." Darren complained but seemed concerned about the situation inside. Afterward, a nurse came out to speak with us. "If you don't mind looking through the glass, you can see how they both are." "Through the glass?" At Morris's puzzled voice, the nurse made a complicated face and led us over. Beyond the guided glass, Rothi appeared to be sleeping exhaustedly. And as for the baby, it was connected to tubes, covered in some kind of case. "That child is our first grandchild." Tears spilled from Darren's eyes, moved by the sight of the small baby fighting to live despite its frailty. "Rothi and the baby are really okay, right?" Morris desperately asked the nurse. Yes, but the baby weighs about 28 ounces and is very small, so it's in a critical situation needing to be connected to tubes for a while. The joy of the baby's birth was short-lived as Morris and I were shaken by a wave of anxiety. We have to send them all the strength we can. I forced a cheerful voice and placed my hands on Morris and Darren's backs. Yeah! Darren nodded with a troubled face and quietly left the hospital. Back home, Darren began rummaging through a drawer. The baby is a boy, right? Yes, that's right. What are you looking for? That thing. Finally finding what he was looking for, Darren looked pleased with himself. Now that the baby is born, we need to give him a name. You're naming him? Of course. He carries my blood. Darren spread out a notebook, with Morris standing silently beside him, resigned that his words would be futile. Darren, oblivious to Morris, was serious as he faced the notebook. He overcame a difficult birth. Let's name him Walton, hoping he leads a calm life. Darren, surprisingly serious about the name, slowly moved the pen across the paper. Looking at the notebook with Walton written on it, Darren said with satisfaction, "How about that? It's a good name, isn't it?" "Yes, thank you." I was hopeful, seeing Darren's happy demeanor, that maybe he would start paying more attention to the family. However, there was one significant issue. Walton was too small to be discharged, and for a while, we were not allowed to meet him directly. Eventually, we were allowed to visit Rothy, so we went to tell her the baby's name. Rothy! How are you feeling? Dad named the baby. I'm okay. Thank you. What name did he choose? Rothy turned her head towards Darren with effort. Walton. It's a good name, isn't it? Darren proudly said, spreading out the notebook with Walton handwritten on it. What a beautiful name. I'm so happy. Thank you. Even as she spoke, Rothy seemed unusually downcast, her face shadowed with gloom. I thought maybe the hospital life had worn her out, and considered leaving her be, but her expression was so troubled I had to ask. Rothy, are you okay? You look so down. Joanna. Rothy looked at me with tears brimming in her eyes, and I knew something was wrong. There's something I need to tell also to Morris and Darren. Morris and Darren exchanged glances and then came closer to me. The thing is, we've been told Walton has a congenital disorder. What? No way. But a disorder doesn't have to mean something serious. Rothy, unable to hold back her tears any longer, trembled as she spoke. The thing is, it seems Walton doesn't have long to live. Not long to live. I unwittingly repeated Rothy's unexpected words. What do we do? A mix of fear and joy, sorrow, and happiness swirled together, creating a heavy atmosphere. Tears began to stream down Rothy's face as the tension broke. Rothy. Walton. Moved by the moment, Morris and I also began to cry, and eventually, we all cried until we had no tears left. After a good cry, Rothy, perhaps slightly toughened by becoming a mom, slowly began to speak. I want to create as many happy memories for Walton as possible. Yeah, let's spend every possible minute with Walton. Rothy, feeling a bit better, nodded and smiled. Half a year later, Rothy and Walton were discharged and came home. During that time, Darren stayed at his family home less than before, and we all prepared to welcome Rothy and Walton. We went out to places Rothy and Morris wanted to visit, adjusting to Rothy and Walton's health. Darren sometimes joined us, and other times he prioritized Carolina, but we focused on putting Walton first, thinking it was a bonus if Darren came along. Walton, who couldn't speak yet but whose expressions became increasingly lively, was adorable, and we showered him with love. After Walton could no longer travel, we spent time walking, sunbathing in the park, and he was adored by our neighbors. However, the joyful time flew by, and Walton passed away at just 3 years old. Rothy, looking at the sky as if to see her son again, murmured, "Walton, it was short, but I enjoyed our time together." Morris, too, looked up at the sky, tears rolling down his cheeks. I was filled with sorrow and didn't think I could move on quickly, but Darren soon returned to prioritizing Carolina and decreased his visits home. The days seemed colorless, as if a hole had been punched in my heart. Though we had no regrets for being there for Walton till the end, the emptiness was heavy. As days swiftly passed, we were soon approaching Walton's memorial dinner. "It's almost time for Walton's memorial dinner." Rothy spoke to Walton's photo with a prayer in her heart. "We should share lots of memories of Walton." "That's a great idea. We need to invite the neighbors who loved Walton." As we talked, Darren, unusually at home on his day off, joined the conversation. "When is it?" "Well, Walton's anniversary is next month on the 14th, so that's our first choice if the venue is available." "I see." After confirming, Darren got ready and left the house. We exchanged puzzled glances, but Darren didn't return that day. The next day, I was busy arranging the memorial dinner, securing the venue, and ordering what we needed. I was about to call relatives and acquaintances when Carolina called. "Joanna? It's Walton's memorial dinner, but I doubt anyone will show up. It's my wedding day, so everyone prefers a celebration." "What do you mean?" "Come on, Joanna. Have you become so forgetful without Walton that you can't even understand English anymore?" Carolina was clearly mocking me. "So, I'm having my wedding on Walton's anniversary. How do you even know the date?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. "Obviously, Bro told me." My anger rose at Carolina's unapologetic attitude. "Why would you do that? Whether it's his wife or grandson, I don't care. It's punishment for taking my bro away from me. He always spoils me," Carolina said bluntly and hung up unilaterally. I was left dumbfounded, holding the phone for a while. Then, Morris and Rothy came in. "Mom, you look upset. What happened?" Snapped back to reality by Morris's words, I hesitated to tell them about Carolina. "Is it about Dad again?" Just as Morris asked, looking into my face, Darren came back home, right on cue. Feeling a sense of duty, I immediately called out to Darren. "We need to talk right now." "What? Can't I have a moment of peace?" Ignoring Darren's complaints, I got straight to the point. "Carolina's wedding is on the same day as Walton's memorial dinner." "What?" "No way." In front of a surprised Morris and a confused Rothy, Darren responded indifferently. "Yeah, seeing my sister in her wedding dress is more important, so you can go to the memorial dinner by yourself." "Dad, are you serious? Don't you care about Walton at all?" Morris trembled with anger, and Rothy started crying from shock. "Quite bold words towards your father." Naturally, as her brother, I'd rather celebrate my cute Carolina than mourn a child who won't come back. Darren began saying outrageous things, but an idea crossed my mind, and I forced myself to suppress my emotions to intervene in their conversation. "All right, I'll consider what you said." Morris and Rothy looked at me with their mouths agape as if their jaws would drop, but I nodded reassuringly, and they seemed to understand. On the day of the wedding, we arrived at the hotel venue. Since we had proceeded with the memorial dinner plans without Darren, he assumed he'd be the only one attending the wedding and sat with the bride's side. We were in mourning attire, standing out a bit, but we weren't breaking any wedding rules, so we remained dignified. Huh? Darren looked puzzled to see us. Actually, we wanted to see Carolina in her wedding dress too. We missed the invitation, so we asked your parents. Figures, right? Despite his words, Darren seemed satisfied, smiling contentedly. As the wedding began, Carolina, dressed in a pure white wedding gown, entered the venue and was surprised to see us. However, she couldn't interrupt the ceremony, especially in front of so many guests, and couldn't say anything, glaring at us in a way unbecoming of a bride throughout the ceremony. The ceremony ended peacefully, and we were there as the bride and groom and their families bid farewell to the attendees. As we were saying goodbye, a person recognized Morris and Rothy, your Walton's parents, aren't you? Dr. Trenton. The person who approached us was Walton's attending physician, who of course knew that today was Walton's anniversary. We really appreciated everything you did. Rothy, Morris, and I hugged Dr. Trenton. No, Walton was very brave until the end. It's been exactly a year today. Dr. Trenton hinted something, but we quickly understood what he meant. The groom, Robert, noticing the last attendees weren't moving, came over. What's going on, Trenton? Robert. Trenton looked troubled, glancing between Robert and us. Do you two know each other? Yes. Robert is a junior colleague of mine. Trenton scratched his cheek, looking unsure of what to do. I've been wondering, what is your relationship with Carolina? Robert asked us, puzzled why we were sitting on the bride's side despite it being our first meeting and our mourning attire. Carolina is my husband's sister, and this is my son, Morris, and his wife, Rothy. I see. And how did you come to know Trenton? Robert asked with genuine curiosity. Actually, we had a child with a congenital disorder. Dr. Trenton took care of him. Rothy answered, and Trenton nodded solemnly. Walton, our child, passed away last year and went to heaven. I'm sorry to hear that. Today is Walton's anniversary, isn't it? Such an important day coincided. I answered clearly, thinking Trenton's point was very valid. The bride chose this day for her wedding, knowing it was Walton's anniversary. That's. Carolina insisted on this day, saying she wanted it no matter what. Was that on purpose? She said she loved children. Robert looked incredulous, and after conveying something to Carolina and Darren, who were happily chatting, Carolina and Darren approached us with Robert. What's this? I was just getting compliments from Bro on how beautiful I look. Carolina snapped at Robert, oblivious to the tense atmosphere between us. You insisted on having the wedding today, right? And you said you loved children. Yet, you knew it was Joanna's grandson's anniversary and still chose this day? Carolina's face went pale, but she desperately tried to cover up. I didn't know such a thing. It must be a coincidence, or you're lying. Carolina's behavior was suspicious. Darren nodded along, but Robert, faced with Trenton's and our denial, clenched his lips and raised his voice. Is that what a person does? Don't you know what's important? I'll have to reconsider the marriage. At Robert's declaration, Carolina's complexion grew even paler, and she started to rant as her lie was exposed. Why are you even here? It's all your fault. Weren't you supposed to be lonely at your memorial dinner? Carolina approached me with such force that I thought she might grab me, and continued her tirade. I'm the happy bride. It's absurd for you gloomy people to be here uninvited. Her loud voice echoed through the spacious venue, attracting the attention of Carolina and Darren's father, Owen, and mother, Teresa, who hurried over. I was the one who let Joanna and her family in. It was an apology for my foolish daughter and son's behavior that I asked them to attend. Dad. Why would you do that? That's too much. Carolina screamed, her fury unabated. If you don't understand why, then we're done with you. Darren too. What? What did I do? I haven't done anything wrong, right? And why am I being disowned? Owen, realizing his children were heartless like cyborgs, sighed deeply. You've always said you wanted to live on your own. Reset everything and start over as a new individual. Facing abandonment by their own father, Darren and Carolina lost the will to argue and fell to their knees. Unknown to many, the hotel where Carolina had her wedding was the same one Joanna and her family had visited for memorable trips with Walton. I had informed the hotel from the planning stages and had first explained the situation to Owen. With Owen's understanding and cooperation, after Carolina's wedding, we invited acquaintances to the same place for a memorial dinner, making it possible to attend both the wedding and the memorial dinner. When I explained to Owen, I was anxious about whether he would believe me, but Owen and the relatives were already disappointed with Carolina's behavior and Darren's patheticness, and they willingly helped. Afterward, Carolina divorced, and soon my divorce with Darren was finalized, and Darren left the house. Having cut ties with Owen, both lost their jobs and homes, and I'm not sure how they're managing now while paying compensation from the divorce trial. Considering the hurt they caused not only to Walton but also to Morris and Rothy, and their abusive words and past actions, I honestly feel they got what they deserved. Morris, Rothy, and I, watched over by Walton's smiling face, have come to live peacefully as if the storm had passed. And with the bad ties cut off, good fortune came our way. Mom! Today, Rothy, who felt something odd in her stomach and went to the hospital with Morris, returned home with beaming smiles. Actually, we're expecting our second baby. With my hands raised in joy, Morris and Rothy exchanged deeply moved glances. Soon, Walton will have a little brother. Kayla, you do realize you're a farmer, right? Please don't touch Samuel with those dirty, soil-stained hands. I hate even having to interact like this. No filthy poor people allowed. Please stay away from now on. I've never even had the chance to hold Samuel. Ever since we met, Naomi has treated me like an enemy, saying mean things and showing me a terrible attitude. Because of that, my heart has already reached its limit. Why is being a farmer something to be frowned upon? I'm just doing my job. I've resisted bending to Naomi's unreasonable behavior up until now, but even that has its limits. Yet, God hasn't abandoned me. My name is Kayla, a widow in my 50s. I live with my son Kenneth and his wife Naomi after my husband passed away. Our family has been farming for generations, and I've continued to work on the farm, inherited from my ancestors. Kenneth, already married, stayed to take over the farm. He's a hard worker and proactive in farming. But to be honest, things haven't been going well with Naomi. Naomi, can we talk? I want to check on the farm. Will you come with me? One day, I invited her with those words. There's a reason I spoke up like this. Marrying Kenneth essentially means taking over the farm. Kenneth understands this well and actively studies farming, but Naomi doesn't seem very enthusiastic about the work. I understand that farming might be seen as a tough and dirty job, especially by the younger generation. I thought the same when I was younger. But once you start, it can be unexpectedly rewarding. Naomi hasn't even set foot in the field yet, and at this rate, she might never discover that sense of fulfillment. So, I thought about going to the field with her to help her find that satisfaction. However, Naomi's response to my invitation was far from positive. To the field? Why? I hate the idea of going to such a dirty place. If you must go, please go alone, Kayla. I'll be relaxing in my room. Don't say that. This job isn't as dirty as you make it out to be. You might even find it enjoyable if you actually give it a try. A little visit wouldn't hurt, would it? It's not like that at all. I genuinely hate farming. Bugs come out, the vegetables are dirty. Isn't it awful to force someone to come to the field? Kayla, this is harassment, you know. Harassment, she said, and I couldn't help but let out a surprised huh. That was never my intention. It was meant to be a gesture of concern, hoping to slightly erase her aversion to farming. Yet Naomi continued. If you understand, then please never ask me to farm again. I didn't marry for your sake, you know. If you say something like this again, I might consider divorce. With that, she spat out her words and returned to her room. I thought about discussing this with Kenneth, but he's so positive about farming and works hard every day, I just couldn't bring myself to tell him. So, I decided not to report this incident with Naomi to him, and from then on, I aimed to live a life that didn't upset her, avoiding any confrontation. But even that didn't go well. In front of Kenneth, Naomi was very kind and dependable. However, the moment Kenneth was away, in the field or out shopping, Naomi would transform entirely. I have no intention of doing the housework, just so you know. If you want housework done, Kayla, do it yourself. I'm not a housekeeper. Kayla, wasn't today's dinner a bit too careless? It was so bad, I thought I would vomit. I managed to eat it, but when I think that Kenneth has been eating such food since he was little, I feel so sorry for him. Naomi's heartless words kept coming. Each time I faced them head-on, I felt my heart aching. Why do I have to be subjected to such unreasonable words? What have I done to deserve this? No matter how many times I asked myself, no answer came. And seeing me worn out, Naomi would laugh again. Kayla, you really aren't cut out to be a person. To think such a person is my mother-in-law, I can't help but worry about the future. I'm sure Kenneth doesn't rely on you much either. Elderly people like you should retire from work soon. Stop forcing the farm onto him. We have our own things we want to do. So, Kayla, please just disappear from our world. I'm sorry. The only words I could muster in response to her barrage were I'm sorry. I was so broken that I couldn't think of any words of defiance. Days like this continued, and I eventually developed insomnia. Yet, somehow, I kept pushing myself in my work. Naomi might think farming isn't a big deal, but knowing there are people waiting for the vegetables I grow, I couldn't afford to take a break. Mom, are you okay? You look a bit haggard. Watching me weaken day by day, Kenneth expressed his concern. But Kenneth only sees the good side of Naomi. He's unaware of the cruel words she hurls at me. I wonder what would happen if he found out. If Kenneth and Naomi were to divorce, would that be my fault? Am I stealing his happiness because of me? With those thoughts, I couldn't say anything more. I escaped his worries with some non-committal words like I'm fine, even though I'm really not. I really am a coward. Amidst all this, some good news arrived. Naomi was pregnant. Feeling unwell, Kenneth took her to the hospital, where they received the diagnosis. That day, the house was filled with a celebratory mood. Naomi seemed to be in a good mood too, not hurling her usual cruel words at me. I even thought it might be the first happy day I've had in a long time. I did my best to support her, ensuring she could have a healthy baby. I prepared meals with plenty of nutrients and fresh vegetables, and knowing that wouldn't suffice, I also made sure to serve delicious meat and fish dishes. She seemed to enjoy the meals, and that filled my heart. Maybe my extra kindness was also because I thought it's important not to stress her during her pregnancy. Eventually, she safely gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I was relieved that there were no health issues at birth. I couldn't visit right away because of my farm work. After some time, Naomi and my grandson returned home. The baby was named Samuel. I endeavored even more, keeping in mind that she now needed to raise Samuel healthily, without too much stress, and hopefully relying on me. But it seemed my efforts didn't reach her. One day, she summoned me. Kayla, a moment. Wondering what it was about, I asked her, only to be met with unbelievable words. Kayla, do you realize you're a farmer? Please don't touch Samuel with those dirty, soil-stained hands. I hate having to interact like this. No dirty, poor-like people allowed. Please stay away from now on. What? I was dumbfounded by her abrupt words. Seeing my reaction, she laughed even more. All this time, I've been pretending to be part of the family, but it's all pointless. She mocked me. I wanted to be family. I thought we could support each other as a family. But it seems that was just a nuisance to her. Unforgivable. To dismiss all my feelings like this. What kind of person does that? Anger towards her welled up inside me, but even then, I didn't know how to respond. Understood. And that was all I could respond. I really am a coward. Even in such a situation, I couldn't muster a response to her words. Why am I so incapable? I thought about whether it was my fault, but more than that, I felt a strong sense of injustice towards her. And in those moments, God didn't abandon me. Kenneth, there's something I need to talk about. At the dinner table that day, Naomi spoke up, sharing everything that had happened. She claimed she had been harassed by me, that she had endured it all this time, but just now I had gone as far as to tell her to leave. She was terrified about what might happen to Samuel if she continued to live with me. She wanted to move out to live just with Kenneth and Samuel, away from me. That was Naomi's claim. Of course, I had no recollection of harassing her. In fact, I felt I was the one being bullied. But my worn-out heart couldn't muster a proper defense. Well, I can't imagine Mom harassing anyone, but if you feel that way, maybe we should consider moving out. Kenneth's words seemed to please Naomi greatly. After that, they decided to move out. However, they couldn't move too far since the family business needed to be continued, so their new home would still be near mine. Yet, just the thought of not having Naomi in the same house made me feel somewhat relieved. Realizing this made me feel awful again. We're a family, I wanted to live hand in hand. If there were misunderstandings, I wanted to work on understanding each other. But my heart was weaker than I thought. And so, they moved to their new home, and I was left to live alone in this big house. Kenneth continued to visit often, but I started to feel the loneliness. The incident happened the day after they moved out. After finishing the day's work, I came home and, having some free time, checked my mobile phone to find numerous missed calls. All from Naomi. Wondering what it could be, but feeling a surge of aversion towards her, I decided to ignore the calls. There were also several texts seemingly asking me to pick up the phone, but I ignored those too. What could she possibly want now? There's nothing I need to talk to her about anymore. I had a bad feeling, but in the end, I did nothing and left it at that. Then, that evening, the doorbell rang. Thinking it might be her, I checked, and sure enough, it was Naomi. Naomi, what is it? I'm sorry, but could you please leave? I don't want to see your face. At my response, she looked as if she was about to cry. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. Say anything? About what? I had no idea, so as I was thinking. Why didn't you say anything, Kayla? You're not just a farmer, are you? You're also a landowner. I didn't know that. Why did you keep such an important thing a secret? Her words left me speechless, a stunned what escaping my lips. Indeed, as she said, my family has been a line of farmers and, simultaneously, landowners. My family has been managing this area's lands for a very long time. Most homes around here are built on land protected and leased by my ancestors. As a result, the locals and real estate agents managing these properties can't go against me. Many respect me for owning so much land. However, I had deliberately chosen not to mention this to her. She looked down on me just for being a farmer, and I thought she wouldn't be interested in my status anyway. It seems she found out through a certain incident. Kenneth and Naomi had moved to a recently built apartment where she noticed that their rent differed from that of their new friends. Their rent was significantly cheaper. Puzzled, she consulted Kenneth. Then, isn't it because the land belongs to Mom? He suggested. True to Kenneth's words, when they decided to move into this apartment, the real estate agent contacted me, offering to rent it out cheaply. I've been leasing lands to this real estate agency for a long time. Some since my parents' days, establishing an inseparable bond. Faced with this unknown fact, she was taken aback. Though aware I was a farmer, she had no idea about the landowning. This revelation apparently panicked her. If you had told me, I wouldn't have behaved like that. I wouldn't have suggested moving out either. I would have definitely thought of getting along with Kayla. Why didn't you tell me? If you had, it wouldn't have come to this. I thought you weren't interested in that kind of thing, Naomi. Don't decide that for me. If I had known you were a landowner, none of this would have happened. In a panic at the doorstep, she grabbed her head and sat down. The commotion attracted the neighbors, their voices audible, making the situation embarrassingly uncomfortable for me. The moment she learned I was a landowner, she started blaming me like this. After demeaning me all this time, she now tries to take advantage of my position. Her opportunistic behavior was infuriating. And dealing with her in this moment felt like an incredibly troublesome time, prompting me to let out a heavy sigh. Then, she looked up in desperation and started apologizing profusely. Kayla, I'm sorry for the horrible things I said. It was a shock to me too. The thought that I wasn't relying on you made me feel down. I don't remember when, but you once said families should support each other, right? I think that's a wonderful idea. So why don't we support each other now? I want to make a real effort with you, Kayla. Naomi said that. Her words felt sincere, but it was also clear that it was all for her own benefit. Her frantic attempts to keep me close are solely because of my status as a landowner. She, who showered me with cruel words for being a farmer, changed her tune once she learned I was also from a landowning family. Dissatisfied with her behavior, I coldly dismissed her desperate pleas. No matter what you say, I no longer intend to join hands with you, Naomi. I remember every harsh word you threw at me. They haunt my dreams, and I still can't sleep well. Life became a bit more peaceful without you, and the thought of returning to that hellish existence disgusts me. Please, don't ever show your face to me again. I don't want to see you ever again. As I spoke, she hung her head, then pleaded even more desperately. Does this mean you won't even hold Samuel? You might dislike me, but Samuel is your grandson. Won't you look after him? Isn't it heartless to ignore your own flesh and blood? Unbelievable. I do feel sorry about Samuel. After all, none of this is his fault or Kenneth's, it's all her doing. But that's a separate issue. Once I've decided not to interact with her, it's inevitable that my involvement with Samuel will decrease. She, the very cause of this situation, still acts as if I'm the one at fault, which only adds to my disgust. Yet, she doesn't seem ready to leave. Seeing me fall silent, perhaps she grew desperate and threw more selfish words at me. Her expression was indeed one of utter desperation. I understand that what I did is unforgivable. I've done things that should anger you, Kayla, and for that, I'm truly sorry. But please, don't abandon me. My heart has changed. I'm filled with a desire to make things right with you. Let's stop this sad separation. We're family, we should support each other, filling in where the other falls short. I'll properly engage in the farm work, I promise. So, please forgive me. Her eyes were bloodshot, clearly desperate to cling to our relationship. The old me might have been swayed by her plea, offering kind words and striving to work together as a family. But now, she is nothing but a destructive force in my life, not a cherished family member. No matter how much she pleads or professes her desire to live together, my mind is made up. I've already given up on her. I'm sorry, but continuing with you is impossible. Your words have hurt me deeply, time and again. I can't endure that life anymore. Being tossed around by you is beyond my limit. Sure, I feel sorry for Samuel and Kenneth, but my heart can't take it anymore. That's... Naomi murmured. Please, don't involve me anymore. And that means forever. I don't consider you part of my family. So, goodbye. The doorbell rang several more times, but after a while, perhaps noticing the neighbor's stares, she finally went home. I never imagined she would come to me like this. All because of my position. But I couldn't call such a person family. The incident spread around the neighborhood and eventually reached Kenneth, leading to a massive argument between him and Naomi. He learned of her behavior towards me, became furious, and even brought up divorce. She desperately tried to avoid it, but once it went to court, the matter was settled. He successfully gained custody of Samuel. It seems she often left the child rearing to him, which might have impacted Samuel's character if it had continued. So, I believe this outcome is for the best. After the verdict, she returned to her parents' home, but it appears Kenneth had informed them of her behavior towards me, and they eventually turned her away. Now, she's working part-time at a small company, barely making ends meet, and living in an old apartment. On the other hand, my life has also changed. Kenneth brought Samuel to my house. Now, Kenneth and I are supporting each other, jointly raising Samuel. After the incident, the neighbors expressed their concern, but I've regained my strength and am back to farming. Kenneth is serious about taking over the family business in the future. The whole ordeal with Naomi was a disaster for both of us, but I hope that one day he finds a partner with whom he can truly collaborate and support. Until then, I intend to protect the happiness of Kenneth and Samuel as a mother. What is a real family? Is it about being blood-related? If that's all it takes to be a family, then I have none. But if someone tells me that's not the case, if there's someone who believes that's not all there is to family, I want to be a family with that person. My name is Melody. At 32, I'm finally getting married and am in the midst of happiness. I met my fiancé Patrick at work, through a certain topic of conversation. After various things, we started dating, and following 2 years of being together, he proposed. I will definitely make you happy. Let's build a warm family together. The moment he said that, I couldn't stop crying. I never intended to get married. I, who had no interest in romance, thought my life would be dedicated to my work. Life is unpredictable. But I can't just be swept away by the word marriage. Family meetings, announcements to various people. Meetings with the wedding venue. And looking for a new home. The days are dizzyingly busy, but it's not a burden because I'm happy. Everything is so enjoyable. However, life has its ups and downs. There's always someone to ruin your happy moments. One day, on a rare day off, while I was relaxing at home, I had visitors. It was my brother Benjamin and my sister-in-law Lily. I live in my parents' house, and when Benjamin and Lily came, my parents had just gone out, unfortunately. I wish they had contacted me in advance. They said they were nearby and decided to stop by. Well, this is Benjamin's parents' house, so they're free to come whenever they want. But all I can do is serve coffee, you know? Just seeing your face, so full of happiness because you're getting married, is enough for me. Saying that, Benjamin patted my head. What's it like to pat the head of your sister, who's over 30? I sometimes wonder, but no matter the age, Benjamin's gentle and warm hand always brings happiness to my heart. Even when I become a grandmother, I'd like to be patted by those wrinkly old hands. Benjamin, still with few wrinkles on his hands or face, is 35. He just married a young woman 10 years his junior last year. For me, Lily is also much younger. Welcome, Lily. When I greet her like this. Thanks. Lily's response is always quite cold. That's just how she is. While Benjamin and I were talking in the entrance for a bit, Lily promptly entered the house and sprawled out on the living room sofa, as usual. Everything as usual. At first, I was amazed, but if this is Lily's normal, it's not for me to comment. If it bothers anyone, Benjamin will say something, so I keep quiet. But there's one behavior that still concerns me. It was when Benjamin stepped away to the bathroom. Hey, Melody. The moment she calls my name, I brace myself, as usual. to me like that, Lily said. Are you really going to be a housewife after getting married? At the family meeting of me and Patrick's families, I talked about quitting my job to become a housewife, and Lily knew because she was there. That's right. Really? Become unemployed, for real? Unemployed, is that such a strange thing? Being a housewife is hard, too. Our mom is one, and it's an important job, protecting the home. When I say that, she laughs at me as if I'm lecturing or making a joke. That's funny. You probably weren't needed at the company anyway. Becoming unemployed, that's the worst. Lily, you're the same, aren't you? It seems like she looks down on it, but Lily herself is actually a housewife. I come from a wealthy family. I'm the daughter of a company president. It would be strange for someone like me to work, right? Besides, I'm loved by Ben. Ben refers to my brother and Lily's husband, Benjamin. So, is she implying that I'm not loved by my fiancé, Patrick? But that's not the only troubling part. Lily's family runs a business, and she indeed is a president's daughter. I attended the family meeting when Benjamin was getting married. I remember Lily's parents flaunting their flashy jewelry and boasting about their expensive, custom-made suits. But behind the scenes, I know about the complaints of low wages among the employees and the salary cuts for staff while increasing the president's salary. Moreover, Lily, who doesn't actually work, gets paid as an employee. It felt like seeing the dark side of small, family-run businesses. Growing up in such a family, there are many things about Lily that make me wonder where the president's daughter is in her. For starters, stop monopolizing the sofa by sprawling out on it. And what's with rummaging through someone else's fridge and shelves, taking out drinks and snacks? And don't just eat them. That's the chocolate mousse I was hiding. I bought it on my way home from work yesterday and was planning to have it for a snack. I was just helping you not to get any fatter. You should be thankful. Thankful, my foot. I was irritated, but I am the elder one. Getting seriously angry over a younger person's joke would only add to my gray hairs and wrinkles. The best thing is to ignore it. But Lily's audacity doesn't end there. It happened during the crucial wedding dress selection for my wedding. Mom wanted to see it too, so she left work early to meet me, but somehow, Lily was also there. Yikes! An unrefined exclamation slipped from my mouth. I just can't be that tolerant. Sorry, but no. I got married just last year, so I think I can give some good advice. Since you are older, maybe avoid flashy dresses? Maybe just a simple dress would be better? What kind of advice is that? Do you even know the meaning of advice? It's supposed to be helpful. Not at all helpful. I feel like she's out to kill my spirit. For now, ignore Lily, just ignore. If that's impossible, empty my mind. Stay calm, and Lily's presence will become nothing. No way, Melody, a princess line dress wouldn't suit you. That's for young and cute girls like me. Do you even know your age? A mermaid line is a no-go too. It shows the body shape too clearly. That's for someone with a nice body like me. Your figure is just unsightly, you know? And showing your back is a bad idea too. That's for beautiful girls like me to show off their dazzling radiance. Your back would just look gloomy. I can't stay calm anymore. Shut up, you woman. If only I could say, who are you to talk like that? How refreshing that would be. But frankly, it's just too bothersome to argue each point. At first, I casually mentioned it, but she just won't listen. But that doesn't mean I should burst into a fiery rage. It would be bad for the shop staff, and I don't want to ruin the atmosphere. I want to enjoy this. So, I have no choice but to endure. Aiming for emptiness, then giving up, repeating this, I somehow managed to finish choosing the dress. Afterward, the three of us went to a cafe. By then, I was really exhausted. It's great that you found a nice dress, Mom said. I nodded in agreement. The dress was nice, but the person wearing it is a bit iffy, Lily said. Enough. Even Mom frowned at Lily's harsh words. Being mindful of her role as a mother-in-law, Mom rarely argues back with Lily. But perhaps she couldn't bear it any longer. Lily. It's not right to speak about people that way. She admonished her. In that moment. That's terrible. Carol, are you bullying me? I was just trying to be helpful. And there it was. It's not like that. After all, Melody isn't your real daughter. Why support her like she's your own blood? Lily started saying outrageous things. Mom, looking distressed, fell silent. She's an adopted daughter, right? So to me and Ben, she's a complete stranger. A person with no blood relation. I was just tolerating that and giving grateful advice. I was speechless. That's right, I'm not her biological daughter. My biological parents died in an accident when I was young, and my current adoptive parents took me in. They gave me as much love as biological parents. Raised by adoptive parents who treated me like their own daughter. My parents and Benjamin, they definitely consider me family. And she dares to say such things to us. I felt the blood drain from my face. But Lily's tirade didn't stop. I think it's enough that Benjamin married me, a president's daughter. Now might be the time to disown the outsider Melody, right? We would never do that. But my dad says it too. It's shameful to have an adult parasite in the family. Having someone like that in our family is a disgrace. So I think it's fine to cut ties with her when she gets married. How could you say that? It was rare to see Mom turn red with anger. Looking at me standing there stunned, Lily said. Well, you'll be leaving this house once you're married. If you're an outsider. I stopped listening after that. I left some money on the table, stood up, and left the cafe. If I had listened to Lily any longer, I'm sure I would have lashed out at her. I didn't want to cause any trouble with Benjamin over something like that. Despite the irritation, the days leading up to the wedding were still busy. As I was resigning from my job, I spent my days handing over work to my colleagues, and before I knew it, the wedding day arrived. I'm so nervous. Patrick, with his gentle smile and reassuring words, stood beside me, trying to calm my racing heart. Today, he becomes my husband. Together, we can overcome anything? Yes. He nodded firmly to my question. I made the right choice. I'm so glad I met him. This was a moment when I was savoring happiness with him. Suddenly, my mobile phone rang. It was Lily. Honestly, I didn't want to answer, but if she's calling at a time like this, it might be something important. Reluctantly, I pressed the call button. Oh, Melody? Hi, how are you? I'm fine, goodbye. I almost hung up on reflex, but I managed to restrain myself. Why does she have to disrupt my mood today? I didn't want to feel irritated on such a day. I calmed myself and asked her calmly. What's up? I'll excuse myself from your wedding today. Excuse me? I had a feeling it was going to be something absurd, but this was beyond anything I expected. After a long pause in my reply, sorry, what did you just say? I asked back. I said, I'm not going to your wedding today. I realize there's no need to go to a stranger's wedding. Stranger? It won't be fun anyway, so why bother going? Plus, why celebrate for a stranger? There's no need, right? So I'm not attending, lol. What does Benjamin say? No need to ask. Daddy says there's no need to go. I think so too. So from now on, don't treat me like a sister. In fact, don't ever come to see me again. We're strangers, lol. I was speechless. What a thing to say. To think she's family. My anger was rising. Enough. I don't want someone like her at my wedding. I planned my next move and spoke firmly. Got it. You're not attending. But are you sure? It's going to be tough. Just remember that. She probably took my words as sour grapes. Lily's mocking laugh echoed from the other end of the phone. What are you even saying? I have and will continue to have a happy married life. You just live your miserable life in silence, lol. Bye. The call ended. I was about to boil over with anger at Lily's audacity, but seeing Patrick's concerned face calmed me down. I had one thing to do. Determined, I made a call to a certain place. After doing what I needed to, I switched my mindset and walked down the aisle as a happy bride. I enjoyed a wonderful reception, and then I realized, hey, isn't this the best ceremony? Because that awful Lily isn't here. The depressing presence that always had something nasty to say was absent. It was unexpected how much lighter and happier I felt without Lily there. As the reception neared its end, it was time for the bride and groom to give their thank you speech. The groom, Patrick, stood up, and I moved to stand beside him. At that moment, bang! A loud noise echoed, and the doors of the venue burst open. What's the meaning of this? A woman's scream resonated through the hall. It was Lily, her face flushed with anger. She must have rushed here, in her everyday clothes. Panting, with disheveled hair and clothes, she didn't look like a president's daughter. I expected the room to erupt into chaos, but it didn't. Of course, we had anticipated something like this might happen, so we had already explained the situation to the attendees in advance. And then, our prediction came true. I took the microphone from Patrick, who was next to me, and then I said, "What's the matter, Lily? You look so flustered." "What's the matter, you say? What did you do?" Lily's voice was louder than mine through the microphone. Her breathing was erratic. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb. Our company suddenly lost major clients who said they'd stop dealing with us. They mentioned it had something to do with you. What's this about?" Oh, that was quicker than I thought. That was my honest reaction. I smiled. "You see, I know various business owners. I told them about the situation with your family's company, that a company run by a family like yours would soon go bankrupt." "How do you know business owners? Aren't you just a clerk?" Time to reveal the truth. My late biological parents, they were fairly prominent business owners. When they passed away, and I was left in shock, all our business partners came forward to support me. "What? So you were a president's daughter?" "It's not a big deal. Just a small company with about 300 employees. 300? Our company only has just over 100. But why were you just a clerk then?" Someone acted as the president in my place until I became an adult. I couldn't just oust them after I grew up. So I stayed on as a clerk. But now that person is retiring, and my husband Patrick will be the next president. He's been recognized for his abilities. "What? You're going to be a president's wife?" Lily was taken aback. "By the way, your family's company has a big deal with ours, right? Started because you insisted on it, wasn't it? What's going to happen to that?" "Of course, that deal is nearing its contract end too, so no renewal." "What?" Lily's scream echoed throughout the venue. There were chuckles from various places. Lily glared at the attendees, but then she noticed something shocking. "Why are you here?" She was looking at the family section. Yes, there sat my brother, Lily's husband, Benjamin. Benjamin shrugged lightly at Lily's words. "Why?" "Because I'm Melody's brother, but there's no blood relation. You don't need to attend a stranger's wedding. To you, family is only about blood, huh?" he said, looking sad. "I don't think so. Family is certainly about blood relations, but there's so much more to it. I've grown up with Melody and I love her as my family. I've never thought of her as anything but my sister. Melody will always be my dear sister." At that moment Benjamin spoke, tears streamed down my face. I had always struggled since childhood, constantly questioning if I belonged in this family. Every time, my parents and Benjamin reassured me with a smile, "Of course, you do." They'd say, "You're an important part of our family," and hug me. Their comforting hand on my head saved me so many times. As Lily stood dumbfounded, Benjamin continued, "Lily, it's a shame. I never thought you could be so terrible. Sorry, but my love for you has completely cooled off. I can't be married to someone who calls my family strangers." "What, Benjamin, what are you?" "I'm divorcing you." "What? Why? Don't you see the contradiction in what you're saying?" "What? If family is only about blood relations, then you and I are complete strangers, aren't we?" "No, that's different. Marriage is, Lily tried to make excuses, but she couldn't think of anything. Panicking, she fell silent. "That's what your words imply. So I can't stay with you anymore." "I don't want to. We'll discuss the rest through lawyers." "No, wait. I don't want a divorce. No." Lily was desperately clinging to Benjamin. Then Lily's parents arrived, looking frantic. Seeing the influential guests at the reception, their faces turned pale. Apologizing profusely, they dragged Lily out of the venue. Afterward, due to the unexpected chaos, my husband, my parents, and I apologized to the reception guests. Hang in there! Warm words of encouragement came from the crowd. I was just grateful. Lily and her family faced a living hell afterwards. Who would want to deal with a company that has her? Was the sentiment, leading to many cancelled contracts. Her parents, unable to salvage the situation, even tried to cut ties with their daughter to maintain business relations, but no companies were willing to continue. Finally, Lily's parents retired, and an employee, chosen by the unanimous decision of the clients for their competence, became the new head, saving the company. I was relieved inside. I couldn't forgive Lily and her parents, but the company's employees were innocent. If Lily's parents hadn't stepped down, I would have offered those employees a place at our company. But, to my surprise, Lily's parents resigned with dignity. They planned to live a modest life in the countryside. As for Lily, despite her complaints about the divorce, it was finalized quite easily in the end. Why, you ask? Because a shocking affair came to light. I won't delve into the details, but Lily, who received a generous allowance as a president's daughter, was apparently frolicking with a man she met online while Benjamin was at work. Benjamin, noticing this, had been quietly gathering evidence. He was considering the right moment to bring up the divorce. I feel sorry for Benjamin, but I hope he finds happiness in the future. Lily, divorced by Benjamin and disowned by her parents. She apparently reached out to many acquaintances, but no one responded, and it said she disappeared into the night. Her whereabouts are unknown since then. As for me, I'm living a love-filled newlywed life with Patrick. One day we had this conversation. Shall we go visit the grave soon? I suggested. Yeah. There's so much I want to report to Dad and the others. Patrick replied. My parents and Patrick's parents both perished in the same major accident. We were both shocked to learn of our shared circumstances at work. In fact, that's how Patrick and I first connected. It must have been a bond formed by our parents in heaven. A precious gift of deep love from our parents watching over us from above. And here on earth, our adoptive parents watch over us with love. There's no greater happiness. Family isn't just about blood relations. It's about being tied together by a much stronger bond. Patrick gently took my hand. I grasped his warm hand tightly and smiled.